G'day guys, welcome to another live stream. Yeah, I've sort of rescheduled it this time back to that previous time that I did it last time, 10:30. So, just to get in a bit earlier for people. So let me just scroll through a few of the comments. Yes, but had a few colourful people today on his. So yeah, I didn't get the only thing is that I didn't get up early enough to see Pims, which I was a bit disappointed because I did actually want to see that from the beginning. So I'll have to watch it after this. I just, so it's going to be interesting. I mean, we've got some views that coincide in regards to that, but there's a few, how can I put it, to be, where we've got our differences on vaccinations and stuff like that. Why am I no longer an anarchist? I don't know. Well, I still have some tendencies in that regard. I just basically think that our society is far too complex to basically, for that to really be able to work. You really need, that's why I believe in direct democracy now, where you still have a state of some semblance or some organized structure, a bit more organized structure. You don't necessarily have to have a state. The concept of a state isn't required. I mean, there were warlords in the past that controlled whole regions. They weren't states. They were just basically, chieftains or stuff like that, or empires that didn't really have any state structure, like Genghis Khan type thing. So, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a state as such to basically have, but the more complex a society becomes, the more sort of you could say, sort of the structures and administration you require for it to become, viable and functional and stable, at the end of the day. And that was this one here, my childhood sort of, what I was. I mean, I don't reject all my past as a child or as a young, to be more precise, as a young adult. But at the same time, I realize that certain things are practical, can be done. Some things are more romantic and can't, So at some stage, you sort of have to grow out of that sort of stage and realize that only more organized structures work. It doesn't mean that basically, I'm not saying, we need elites. No. But it means that we need more organized structures. And I've always said, direct democracy, but it would mean that you would not elect leaders, because you've got a direct democracy means that you actually run things. Let me just put this in because eventually, so I can get rid of any feedback or noises around me. So any sort of like a direct structure allows you to basically then appoint people, like we do with juries, which is a blind thing, so you don't know who ends up in that sort of position, and they act in an administrative role for, they used to have it for a month. You could have it for 3 or 6 months or whatever. Depends on the level of education of the population as well, to be able to take those roles on and stuff like that. So, certain things at different points in history are more practical than others. So it's never, you can never, these are complicated things. It's easier to basically just, as a much younger person, put or believe in something, and then as you get older, you've got more experience, more knowledge. You've been part of organizations, you've run organizations, and you see the complexity that there is in there, and you realize that certain structures don't work as well. It's just, so, but it doesn't mean that we need powerful elites to basically run our lives either. We've done quite well in the past without them. 3 million years of, tribal societies and many other sort of structures. So, but at the end of the day, it's, it would be a very, I think technology as it moves forward and enables us to basically participate in a bigger way, it makes it more possible, but at the end of the day, still you have to have the majority of the populace that agree with that sort of thing, to come on board and sort of want to go down that path. It's just a general one, I don't even know whether Jared's going to turn up or not. So what's happening with him, whether something in his personal life has come up that he can't make it. So yeah, I'm sort of into physics, archaeology, history, all sorts of things. So, I've got quite a few very varied and eclectic sort of interests. I try and make it colourful and understandable. I try to keep the message simple. I mean, we could use always complex terminologies, but what's the benefit of that? If I'm here just talking to myself, I can do that. But I'm trying to get information across, trying to help you guys with things, and that's. G'day, Richard. Good to see you, mate. So let me see whether we can get into some of the questions. Random one? Yeah, me too. I actually stayed with it. I actually joined Bart's much later on, like yourself. I found that far more interesting, cerebral for me. That would be a very long conversation to go into, basically, into quantum theory and especially quantum biology. As I said, I'm going to be doing stuff in the future, but what I'm trying to do with these live streams and other things that I do is work towards it. To introduce concepts and ideas and stuff like that, and then explain things. Because me just talking over your heads isn't going to really help anyone in that regard. So, we will get that into a future date in that regard. I feel like Pottinger's like that cat. Sort of, I don't know whether I'm alive or dead. Yes. What have I been eating? Actually, yesterday, I went around to Dad's place and we had cod, and I pigged out in cod. I had 6 small servings of cod, and I really pigged out. I actually didn't eat anything after that. I just couldn't put anything down. I sort of walked lazily back home, and then the only thing I had in the early evening was a glass of milk. That was it, raw milk. Just I was stuffed. I haven't actually had any food today, other than a glass of milk. I'm just so, unhungry, after all that food yesterday. I was just sort of, it was feast. Let's put it that way. I overly feasted. Pizza toppings for meaty salad. Oh, okay. Whatever works for you. Yeah, it was good. I actually really enjoyed it. I only saw the end part of it, and I sort of only was able to participate right at the end. I don't know the academic that was on there. Look, I'll tell you one thing that I've actually noticed with a lot of academics. Like Linus Pauling, where he was a great academic, a Nobel Prize winner, and then basically went off the rails with vitamin C. I don't know what it is. It's like this sort of, they call it there's an actual name for it. They actually call it the Nobel Prize when people win the Nobel Prize, and after that, they've achieved the pinnacle of their success, and then in their older years, they basically just go into these sort of conspiratorial, really sort of, they overthink things, or I don't know what it is, but they seem to really go off the rails like, as I said, Linus Pauling went off the rails in terms of vitamin C. He became really a big proponent of it. He even forced his wife to take mega doses of vitamin C when she had cancer, and it didn't save her. She died. He failed to save her. But so I don't know whether this lady's on a similar trajectory where she's come off her career, she's been in the doldrums for years, she's not connected with that industry anymore. And I mean, in every industry there are things, let's say, that are less than professional. I mean, even in my industry, there are things that happen that are less than professional, and I get irate and pissed off with certain things that happen as well. But that doesn't mean that, overgeneralizing and saying, everything in that industry is bad, is an oversimplification. So, yeah, look, it's a bit like that, guys, sort of, yeah, it'd be interesting to watch it from the beginning and see exactly, all these. Yeah, there are pros and cons with vaccinations and with that whole field. The way I see it is, let's go back in history. And that's why history is really important. And, I've always looked at history, polio epidemic, bubonic plague, all these sort of things. When you go back in history and you look at before vaccinations, before immunization, before sanitation, before any of this, and the diseases were horrendous, the communicable diseases. They devastated populations, whole populations. There were leprosy colonies up until the early parts of the 20th century. We live in the late part of the 20th century and early part of the 21st century in a period where technologically we're able to keep all these things at bay to a large extent. And so we can sit around philosophizing and sort of making comments about how good vaccines are not. But if you go back and ask those people back then what they think, they'll tell you you're fucking, you're off your tree, you're crazy, because they actually suffered severe issues in regards to these sort of ailments and all that. So yeah, it's depends on your perspective, whether you're back there suffering from all these and dying and having many of your members of your family dying, or so yeah. But as I said, vaccines aren't perfect, and I wish we could actually improve our vaccination methods and actually have like sprayable types rather than injectables. So you've got a proper immune response, like a more natural form of immune response with less problems. Whether we had things like using UVC to basically clean water rather than using chlorine and stuff, and fluoride and stuff like these sort of things. So there's a lot of these sort of things that basically could have been done a bit better. Or we could do them better now. We could change these things. But, states are not essential unless you believe in, look, exactly. Well, states only exist because they reinforce a structure of power. That's why they exist. I mean, whether it's a pharaoh, whether it's a king, whether it's a warlord, or whether it's whoever, it basically, they are there to keep somebody at the top of the pile at the end of the day. That's why they exist. They haven't been essential for the majority of human life. Yes, that's true. But as I said as well, I'm realistic and practical that, I don't expect humanity to switch over to an anarchist type of view. That's not going to happen. And it's not practical. So a direct democracy where there is some sort of semblance of a structure, of a state structure, but controlled directly by people, the citizenry, as most democracies were meant to be. Even the American democracy in the beginning was meant to be more controlled by. There was actually there was a struggle in the early part of the US state when it was developed in order whether to go direct democracy or not. And people say, well, you can't do it. It's not practical and all that. They do it in Switzerland. In Switzerland, they've married direct democracy at the local level completely. And at the federal or the sort of the state federal type level, they've got it in a sort of indirect way. So they've gone part of the way in that direction, and they have a citizen army, they have a citizen sort of society. So they've actually tried to mimic some of those elements of the ancient Greek thing. So it's not impossible. There has to be a will and an interest by the populace to go down that path. And, where I live, there's nothing like that. Where most people live, there's nothing like that at this point in time in history. Maybe in 10 years' time, maybe in 100 years' time, beyond my life, maybe there'll be a different sort of movement, different interests by the population. They'll be sick and tired of being bossed around, Time will tell. Yes, many people are fed up with lockdown. Yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily an anarcho-capitalism. I mean, we lived in a sort of a communal type tribal society for millions of years. If the machinery, I don't want a party or political entity basically controlling me, no, like in China. But if you had basically a direct democracy like in the sort of ancient Greece, and you had the means of production rather than having slaves, but the actual machinery, technology, the robotics and all that basically being our sort of, things that did all the work and all that, are more like a Star Trek-y type thing. Yeah, it'd be more something like that I'd be more interested in. This is the sort of stuff that basically certain people want, but what they mean is it's just usually what the elites want. They want a state for everyone else, but an complete anarchy for themselves where they can just run riot and do whatever with no regulations or anything. So, yeah, it depends on who you're talking to about those sort of things. Yes, the world does work at the subatomic level that way. There's still questions on, yep, we've got pretty good evidence that relativity does work. We know that time dilation works. We've put atomic clocks, one on the ground and one in the air, and basically come back and seen the difference between the two clocks. We've measured a lot of things, gravitational waves and all sorts of things, certain behavior of black holes. So we've confirmed quite a lot of, it doesn't mean it's complete work, and then we won't progress and find, a deeper understanding of nature as we move forward. That will happen in time. We'll develop technology where we can actually observe things in greater detail, and that will bring up new issues with his theory, and eventually that will bring about some new revolution in science, which will, like he brought a revolution from earlier science that existed, prior to him. You had one theory of gravity and also of of electromagnetism as well, which was Maxwell's sort of equations and stuff like that. And then eventually, he moved science forward. There were others in quantum, in the quantum domain, like Niels Bohr's and other things that basically moved that edifice forward. And hopefully we'll get another person like that or people like that in the future that will move us forward again. So time will tell. But I don't think speculative sort of string theory and stuff like that, and mathematical modeling and stuff like that, this sort of rational BS, is really going to progress science. We really need to be able to, because a lot of these things, like string theory is falling apart because a lot of the observational stuff is coming back and actually poking holes in it. And when you've got too many paradoxes and too many holes in any theory, you sort of get to the stage where you say, well, I think it's had its day. That's all I'll say about it. Let's move on to nutrition. Okay, amount of daily to dissolve arterial plaque. You would have to, let's pull back a bit. The main thing is, if you're going to use MK4, you really need to be on a clean diet. No cheats, no nothing. That means you need to be really clean about it. You also have to combine fasting, because fasting clears out the junk. So, MK4 plays a role in pulling calcium out of soft tissue, but at the same time, you need the autophagy effect to basically assist in clearing out a lot of the other debris, a lot of the other parts that are there. So they work synergistically. So you need to combine these sort of things in a way. I used 5 milligrams, but I've heard people use higher than that. I have no idea what the upper limit is for MK4. Nobody does. It seems the more, each time you increase it, the body just takes it in, sucks it in. So I don't really know what the daily limit is. So I couldn't actually tell you. There is no science that actually can tell us the daily limit for MK4. Seems the body just loves it. So every cell sucks it in. Doesn't stay resident in the bloodstream for too long, whatever amount you give it. So, yeah, me too. Look, cod, I have to say I do like cod. What other fish do I like? I like mackerel, cod. I actually like those more than even sardines. I don't mind sardines, but, those are much more favourites of mine. I like, I also like other seafood like squid, octopus and stuff like that. So, yes, that would take many hours to go through. Yes, that cat, Schrodinger's cat in the box. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I always get mixed with Pottinger's. Yeah, Schrodinger's. Yeah, I think I said. Can't even remember now. Yeah, it is difficult to pronounce. Hey, Root. G'day, mate. Good to see you. Patricia, Shell, and Zombie. Monk Bang. How are you? Yes, there's been a few. We've had 3 today. Don't know whether there was any earlier than that. 4th, you say, oh, so you must have got up really, really early. I was still getting my beauty sleep, but I don't think it's been working. I've been just lately, last couple of nights, I've just been going late to bed. I don't, I shouldn't be, but I've been doing the wrong thing. Bad boy. Just doing stuff or just reading up on stuff, and then you look at the time and you go, oh, shit. Yep. No, there isn't. It's just basically sanitation antibiotics were the only thing that basically dealt with it. Like, syphilis is the same thing. Antibiotics, not sanitation, but antibiotics. But even though we had some level of sanitation that through the 20th century, there were still leprosy colonies until antibiotics came around and dealt with it, because it is a bacterially based disease. And the same thing with syphilis. So that was around for quite some time, and now it's an extremely rare thing. Don't know about the future, especially with all this bacterial antibiotic resistance that we're seeing from the misuse. See, antibiotics are not the problem, it's the misuse. We humans are just fucking stupid sometimes, and we allow antibiotics to be used in agriculture to fatten up animals. Again, for profit, not for human health. And this is where the problem lies. And people sort of criticize the antibiotics, but they should be criticizing the industry that's at fault, which is the agricultural the sort of the big agri sort of businesses that are out there that are basically being able to do this and get away with it, and nobody's making an issue on it at all. Mate, I've unsubscribed from Luke and Hellman, or Luke Miller as his name is. And, good luck to him. I hope he does well in his life. But he can't go around throwing mud at people and calling them, Satanists and all. So especially, I find it extremely offensive being a Christian, an Orthodox Christian. So, that's just not on. I have no problems with people having disagreements with me, disagreeing with me on things like EMFs or whatever. He had the opportunity. He was on the same sort of 5G round table that Bart had, and he had the opportunity to basically bring up evidence that contradicted what I was saying. He could have basically had the opportunity to disprove me. Because remember, Bart approached him first. It was he that had approached Bart talking about these issues, not me. So, this whole thing that I got that, and at the same time, Bart knew that I had some views that were slightly different than those of Jack's, especially I sort of more agree with Bart in terms of diet trumps. There's not much UV, the sort of, let's say, tropics. You get plenty of deuterium depletion and plenty of light sources for basically redox potential, but still you've got diseases of, or as Weston A. Price would have called them, diseases of civilization, like diabetes and all these sort of things. So I think while all these other things, circadian rhythm, sleep, stress management, all that have a role, I think diet out-trumps all those. And so does Bart. And that's where we're in agreement. And so Bart was going to bring on Jack Cruz to talk about the 5G stuff. Had me, and the reason when I heard about the Jack Cruz stuff, Bart knew that I was interested, because I want to discuss a few other things, not only 5G with Jack, but I don't think he wants to debate me, so that's fine. I've got no problems. If he doesn't, I'm not going to force the issue. And pretty much, he didn't turn up. I was approached by Bart, that because we'd actually, he had actually mentioned me that Howman had actually approached him about discussing this sort of things, and said, well, are you interested? And I said, yep, I'll come on. So, so basically, because Bart had already known that I had certain views on EMFs. So, and Luke had different views on EMFs. So he said, yep, bring them both on. So that's what he did. He wasn't able to get Jack. Fine. Jack had other things to do. And, we got into, presenting our case. He couldn't present anything. He presented absolutely zero evidence, zero real good arguments and all that. The stuff And most of the other stuff we're in sort of an agreement anyway, which was basically that there's not enough sufficient science. There's not enough, quite a few issues of that sort. We need to do more. But that's the same thing with nutrition. With a lot of fields of human health, there's a lot of issues in that regard. We don't have enough of this or that or whatever. But he wasn't able to present anything, any evidence whatsoever. And then went on a tangent because, I don't know, maybe he felt reputation-wise he had lost out slightly, so he doubled down and so went after me and Bart. So it's he's basically spit the dummy a bit like Frank, and doubled down and decided to take on everyone else and call them shills and call them all sorts of things. That's just not on. If you can't put forward a credible argument, you don't go round pointing the finger at people and calling them shills or all sorts of nasty things or Satanist or whatever. That's just, just not wrong. Basically, that tells you basically that somebody that succumbs to that sort of behavior, has already lost the argument as far as I'm concerned. I've got no idea what he's doing in his life or whatever. Not really interested. If he wants to live in his little crazy little world, good for him. I'm not interested. As far as I'm concerned, is as I said, even EMFs, photons that are emitted from all these electromagnetic sort of fields and whatever else, there is a part of that is in the blue spectrum. Okay, blue and green spectrum, but we'll just focus on the blue that's the key one. But also things that don't emit EMFs, which is like, the LED light bulbs, they don't emit EMFs, but they also basically produce blue light. And so there's a lot of things that produce, the sun, UV, basically, when it's, the middle of the day when there's more UVB, there's actually more blue light. And that's a normal thing, And then in the evening, as we're moving to near infrared, we're getting less direct sunlight, that starts coming off, tapering off. And as it tapers off, our melatonin goes up. Now, where the problem lies is blue light. Now, blue light is in screens, is in your mobile phone, all these sort of things. Your LEDs, your lights and stuff like that. Incandescent, less of an issue, not as severe. And what happens is that suppresses melatonin production. It means that at night you don't get into deep sleep. If you don't get into deep sleep, you don't repair as well. You don't heal as well. You don't have actually improved redox potential to basically, provide enough generate that sort of energy to basically fix things and all that. You don't also, the other thing is, by not getting into that deep sleep, those plaque, in your head, in your brain, don't get cleared out. So, are we setting ourselves up for dementia and Alzheimer's in later years because of that? Because we're not getting deep sleep, we're not clearing out these things, this debris and all that needs to be cleared out. So this is where blue light is an issue. And Jack's sort of discussed this and pointed this, and there's actually good research. I can show you a whole lot of PubMed studies that talk about blue light and Alzheimer's, blue light and dementia, blue light and circadian rhythm mismatch, and blue light and sort of a whole lot of other health related issues, and also your eye health as well. There's a number of people that basically talk about eye health, who are ophthalmologists and actually have research on circadian sort of issues. So I can actually show proof of that element, in terms of the photons that are being emitted, and if you've got this stuff around you all the time. In terms of, there is no ionizing radiation, but in terms of, having constant radiation, we have a lot of radiation. Our bodies are used to it. Cosmic rays are coming in. Fuck. As I heard somebody say, don't tell Frankie about cosmic rays. Yeah, he'll probably fucking build a bunker and bury himself, under 2 kilometers of soil to escape cosmic rays. I mean, our bodies are robust to handle that. I mean, we're going to get more oxidative stress from the sun. I showed in that because remember, when radio waves, when you actually put energy into the transmitter device, it actually sends out these radio waves. Okay, now these radio waves, the longer, like those longer wavelengths and longer distance ones, like EMF and stuff like that, AM, and all those long wave, sort of waves, they can actually get long distances and deep penetration into tissue. The short ones like FM, they don't have a long distance and have less penetration. That's why they have to put more aerials. And it's the same thing with 4G and then 5G and all that. They have shorter distances, less penetration into tissue. Actually, 5G is even safer than 4G in a sense because it's got less penetration. So why are people calling it, yes, it may have more energy, but that energy isn't, just translates to a bigger bandwidth. It means a wave that can hold more information, but it's still a wave that basically is shorter range and penetrates tissue far less. So when they looked at these millimeter waves in that Japanese study, and I picked deliberately, even Bart used in his corona thing, he used the Korean study to show that the coronavirus was real. I use a lot of and I've actually encouraged Bart to do the same thing, to look outside North America where there's a lot of industry funding and a lot of industry involvement, in order to basically look at finding credible science that's done in academic circles and in these other countries, paid by their taxpayers, and no industry involvement, where they don't have these sort of industry involvements in a lot of these countries. Even in bloody Iran, you can actually get good research. So I've actually seen really good research out of Iran on testosterone, far better than America, where there's, all these businesses that want to sell you testosterone, so obviously, they're skewing the studies. There's more corruption in US science, believe me. And, and that's why I picked Japanese, where they really did good work. They had a really good containment vessel. So you couldn't get any spurious signals from other sources. So they were only focused on the sources that they were actually bombarding these, eye tissue with, to basically see what happens. Was there any increase in in sort of those heat shock proteins? Was there any? Nope. That means no oxidative stress. So to get oxidative stress, heat shock proteins go up. Was there any of the other stuff? Any genotoxicity, which is basically your DNA getting damaged or anything like that? And that's why I don't believe in that. It's bullshit. There is no experimental. Whenever they've done experiments, nothing. But I can definitely find stuff about the photons in those frequencies of blue light. The only thing that Luke's possibly done right is basically, after he'd been hearing me hammering about blue light for so long, he went and bought himself blue blocking glasses. So he realized that, yeah, that's an issue. But he sort of ignored all the other stuff, because basically the other woo-woo stuff basically was good clickbait, and then basically became part of his meal ticket. So, yeah, unfortunately. Hopefully he comes back to the community. I don't hold, I mean, even the nasty things that he said to me, I forgave him. Now, if he comes back, good for him. If he doesn't and keeps on ranting away and attacking everyone, he's not making friends, and he's not helping anyone ultimately. Okay, Patricia says, when I was a child, I knew a woman who survived polio. I know how she felt about vaccines. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly. Older people in that generation that suffered a lot of these sort of things have a very different view than people nowadays. I'm not saying that vaccinations are 100% or don't have issues, but the amount of people that they harm compared to the amount of people that they sort of help, sort of one outweighs the other compared to if you just allowed viruses to rampantly go through the population. Just look back in history in that regard. The C19 vax. What's the C19 vax? Is this the coronavirus we're talking about? I basically, to be honest, if it comes out, I'm not going to take it. And I'll tell you why. Because at least with the other vaccinations, they've been around for some time and been tested for a number of years. And I know that they were safe. Because I know the Japanese one, that's really, I mean, that can actually affect your reproductives, which is, why would you release anything like that into the population? So I think this sort of mad rush to get something when there are other options, there's, quinine together with basically with zinc, together with vitamin D, for, and certain other things, and a better, cleaner diet to recommend to improve your immune system. There are far better options. So no, I will not be taking that thing if it sort of no contact, mate. No contact anymore. If he comes back and apologizes, yep, I'm willing to consider. I've sort of forgiven him. Because there's no reason to hold grudges or be nasty to people. That's not my style. But friends, you got to earn friendship. You basically got to earn it. And I think when you turn around and put the knife into your friends, it's not really friendly. So if he basically comes back and apologizes and says, look, I did the wrong thing, I withdraw all that shit that I said and all that, and I've got a different opinion from you on different things, which is fine. I've got no problems with that, but that nastiness is just unacceptable. 2 days ago was the worst day ever. Woke up, tick biting my ass. Water pipe burst, my attic, and I got my period. I can't really, on that point, I've never had that, that last one. So I can't really know what you're feeling. I know from my sister, she always gets moody. The tick can carry spotter fever. Okay, fair enough. So this has happened to you more than once? Is that the one that actually, does that affect, can't remember now. I know there's one in Australia that actually affects it creates like a sensitivity to beef, to red meat, but I'm not sure whether that's an American one. Is that similar? Nope. He's got no evidence to back up anything that he says. So it's either speculation, fear-mongering, or he makes it up. I don't know. Take your pick. I haven't been able to work out what it is. But he had his opportunity, and I'm willing to debate him anytime he wants, on a separate channel. So, on any issue. But he's got no evidence, so he'd be just wasting people's time. You got to have evidence. You got to be able to come up and prove things and all that, because I can show him a lot of evidence that basically contradicts what he's saying. And I'm not talking about industry stuff from the US. I avoid that Deliberately, I avoid that because people can poke holes at it by saying, oh, it's industry funded. So I just use international, Asian, some European studies. That's where I focus primarily. Even my K2 information is Japanese and the Netherlands. So it's Dutch and Japanese research on K2, which is all MK4, which they've done. So I don't even look at it. Vitamin K2's research out of the US either, because a lot of it's industry funded, unfortunately, by the companies that actually produce the MK7 supplements. So I give them a big miss. And then when I look at the Japanese stuff, I can see that MK4 has better results in these ailments, and also the Dutch ones in terms of what it does. Now, that doesn't mean that MK7 doesn't. It just basically means that MK7 is poorly converted in a lot of people, and in about a third of the population doesn't get converted at all back to MK4, the animal form. So a third of the population just wasting their money, and everybody else is wasting their money partially. Yeah. Carnivore diet, libido. I'm harder than Chinese algebra. Okay. Is that mostly to animal fats? Look, animal fats, fat-soluble vitamins, cholesterol, all these things play a very important role in good sexual function. So, in that regard, yes. Even at my age, when I get up in the morning, most mornings I actually wake up with a heart on. Yep. So that tells me that the diet is definitely doing something positive, even at my age. So, and even Dad, hope he's not, well, he wouldn't be watching this, but anyway, at 84, he's actually mentioned that to me, and I've said, Dad, I don't want to know, so yeah, it seems to continue working even into older age. Now, general performance is not going to be like a young person, but it means for your age, where you are at your age, you're going to be basically performing far better than somebody that's younger, that's at the same age, but is on an inappropriate diet. So that's, that will be the fundamental difference in that regard. Yes. Harut, can't say it cause and effect. Might be a coincidence. What's on this? Hold on. But I seem to have developed psoriasis on my arms after getting yellow fever vaccine. Okay. A few years back. That just may be coincidence, a bit like people with autism having at a certain stage. It could be other factors. I've never heard of yellow fever vaccine causing psoriasis. So then again, you may be a susceptible person. Don't know in that regard, but I know that in sort of parts of West Africa, like Nigeria and parts like that, Brazil, the sort of Amazon sort of basin, there's quite a bit of that in that sort of area, and there's no cure for it. But things like psoriasis and stuff like that, usually, I usually say to people, up your fat-soluble vitamins, in particular retinol and MK4. And you really have to keep them very clean. I know that people that basically have even some gluten in their diet, or some of the nightshades type vegetables, seem to have especially gluten, but even some with the nightshade vegetables seem to have more of an effect. But gluten's the big one when it comes to psoriasis. Usually most people, when they give up gluten, psoriasis goes away. But fat-soluble vitamins play a role. So up your fat-soluble vitamins and see how you go. And make sure that there are no sources of gluten that are coming into your diet that you may not. So check to see what you're eating, or what maybe you're eating with your family occasionally, and see what's in it, because there may be some gluten in there and you may be reacting to that. So, because usually, after many years, you're not going to develop psoriasis after many years from a vaccine or something like that. Most of the effects are very early on that happen, so and most reactions, even when you get a virus, usually happen. There are some cases, but I've never heard of yellow fever, but I know with herpes, that if your immune system becomes weak and the immune system can't suppress it, because it uses calcium to suppress it into soft tissue, and you can't suppress the herpes virus, you usually get outbreaks. But I've never heard of yellow fever causing psoriasis outbreaks. If you can point me to some science, I'd be willing to look at it, but I've never heard of it, to be honest, never. So don't know. Maybe just coincidence. Maybe other things that you haven't realized in your diet. Maybe there's some chemical in your environment that your environment's changed in some way, and some chemical exposure that you may be, even low grade. You may have to investigate a bit further to try and work out. Hi, Harry. I don't believe that all the people are smart enough to vote. Look, in most cases, most people, I would say people are capable of voting and smart enough to and have enough social capacity to work out whether something's dodgy or not. Now they may not understand why it's dodgy. That means they may not have, but then that would mean, we would go back to sort of the Platonic sort of approach of philosopher kings running society and the rest of us being plebs. That was the argument of, Socrates. That's why he was given an option: either take the poison and die, which he wanted. He did it as a martyr, or go into exile. They didn't want to kill him. They just wanted to send him into exile, get rid of him out of the state. So he didn't basically foment rebellion, because he wanted to actually overthrow democracy, direct democracy. I think people can, over time, if they're as I said earlier, it depends on the level of education of a society whether you can do it or not. A highly educated society like the citizenry of ancient Greece or the citizenry of Switzerland, it's practical. You can do it. For most populations around the world that haven't got a certain level of civic education and a certain level of education in general, it could be a problem. People can't read and write. It can be a big problem trying to get them to be functional citizens. So it's dependent. As I said earlier, a lot of these things in theory look okay, but in practice, they're not practical. And so that's why I nuanced what I said, that there has to be, at a certain point you can do it, at a certain point you can't, or in certain societies or certain parts of the world you can't. And so if you look at historically, we've progressed from these sort of agricultural to feudal type societies and moved on as our civilizations progress, our knowledge base, our capacity, our citizenry participation has gone up. If we go back even a couple of 100 years, citizens, there were very, very little literacy and very little basically democracy on this planet, even this sort of representative democracy. So you have to have a certain level of capacity to educate people, So unless you've got that, you really can't have direct democracy. Now, obviously, in ancient Greece, they had the capacity because they had, a lot of labor-saving devices, technology that they'd invented, together with a whole lot of, slaves that basically did all the work, and citizens had time to educate themselves and acquire the capacity, a bit like Star Trek, where you've got all computers and all machines doing all the work, and these people basically explore the universe and educate themselves, because that's their job, just to educate themselves. They don't have to basically work physically, or all they have to do is just educate themselves and explore space. So in that sort of structure, yep, you can have direct democracy in a very complex system. You could have simple democracy in a less complex system with less education, like in a tribal society, get around the fireplace and decide how we're going to go and slaughter a couple of animals, because your requirements are much lower. But if you've got a sophisticated society which has these higher levels of requirements, to construct things, to have things working in time, just in time production and whatever else, these are complicated entities. This requires a more educated population. So what you're actually able to do at some point in time depends on a lot of, it's never possible. It's just maybe not possible now at this point in time in history. So don't lock yourself into now. Think in terms of the potential. And I talk about that in that regard. So, I say, practically, this is what we can do now. Practically, we can't do that. We may be able to do it in the future, depending on all these factors. Okay, you do? You're a monkey. I'm a monkey. Why can't you be a normal human being and not watch JoJo? What the hell is JoJo? Okay, I'm too old for that. Just realised that. But I move on. Should I get into JoJo? Maybe not. Okay. TP hoarding is a good example of why politics doesn't even work. Most people, yeah, look, as I said, most people still engage their reptilian part of their brain, that at the base of their actual brain. There's the old reptilian brain. Unfortunately, still a lot of people engage that to a large extent for a lot of their decision making. And yes, we've got a long way to go before we become a more enlightened population. We are far better than we used to be. If we go back in history, things were a hell of a lot worse and a hell of a lot more simple. And, you grab somebody from the past and have a conversation with them and you'd be shocked. So we've come a long way. Let's put it that way. Am I aware of Ether's theory? No idea. What the hell is that? Let me just take a look. I'm always interested in new ways of. Oh, you mean the Teslas? Oh, I thought you were talking about some other sociological thing. As in ether. Okay, Tesla, and yes, I am. Yes, but that was debunked years ago. So it's just. I'm trying to remember what. I can't even remember now. It's a long time ago since that was in the late 19th century, or was it earlier than that? I think it was in the late 19th century, but I could be wrong. Yeah, pretty much Einstein already has debunked it. Yeah, it's been debunked. There's a few people like that were talking about this sort of like ether environment that sort of forces went through and all that. I can't remember. There was, I think Lord Byron was into that shit, and there was a whole lot of people back in those days about that in the ether spirits could traverse as well. So there was some really weird wacko stuff back then. I mean, physics pretty much blew all that debris away. So I mean, Isaac Newton, the time he came in and created his theory of gravity, it was a very early stage, and a lot of these other areas, and then you had a lot of the the electromagnetic force, Maxwell's equations and all that sort of stuff that was coming out, and people started trying to combine using that to create this sort of ether model. The reality is there was zero proof, a lot of speculation, a lot of talk, but they never were able to basically prove anything. And, then Einstein just blew that whole edifice away, which was a good thing. But that would be a long, long conversation. And this is nutritional live stream primarily. I don't mind, chatting about, but, that's for a very other day. I may actually in the future do something, sort of a live stream, which is just has to do with these sort of issues, but that will be a separate thing, like I did with the corona thing. I may actually do that. Actually, see how many people are interested and turn up. Maybe there'll only be a couple. So yes. Maybe Bank Supreme, and Luke that turn up, and that's it. 3 of us. How to prepare beef heart. I usually, the way I do it is I cut it into really thin strips, and I sort of lightly cook it. I don't like cooking it really heavy because I don't want to lose a lot of the nutrition, especially the CoQ10 factor in there. So that's why I sort of cook it like that. There's a number of ways you can cook it. I've actually done it in the past where I've used put it into like a butter and rosemary type thing and just let it, stay overnight. And then the next day, just cook it with that and get it you lose a bit of nutrition, but making it crispy and like a crispy sort of snack. What other way? You can mince it and put it into minced meats and all that. So, and that combines really well because it's all, it's a muscle, so it combines really well. That's another way of doing it. How else? I find thick steaks not a good idea because it's too fibrous, and that's why I said, cut it really thin because it's too fibrous, or mince. I think that's probably the 2 best ways that I would basically prepare it, and then so that's for me. But comment MK4 is fancy saying K2. No, that's just a menaquinone. There's a whole lot of menaquinones which are part of the K2 family. So I mean the ones that are most well known. I mean a lot of the cheeses will have sort of like menaquinone for. Some of them have 7, not all of them. Some of them have 5, menaquinone 5, 6. So there's a couple of those menaquinones. and they have different sort of reactions, but at the same time, they all pretty much convert through a number of pathways. The majority of them end up converting down to MK4 because MK4 is the animal form. The only cheese that it has that has 100% MK4 is brie, and all the animal, like the organs, like emu oil, organ meats, they're all MK4. It's just all MK4. So if you're eating from a ruminant animal, you're only going to get MK4. If you're including the oil of like which is very high in emu oil, is really high in the MK, and that's fat soluble vitamin. No idea why the emus have such a high level of MK4. Yeah, don't know. And most of the cheeses, excluding brie, are pretty much a mixed bag of all these different menaquinones. And the highest form of MK7, which is natto, which is fermented soy. But remember, MK7 can't be converted by about a third of the population, so it's useless. And other people have different levels of conversion. I think Japanese have quite good conversion levels, but it doesn't surprise me. They've been consuming that as a breakfast for many years, especially in the northern parts of. They don't consume it down in Okinawa, but in the northern parts, everything from Tokyo upwards is where you get all the natto type dishes and stuff like that. Yeah, I wouldn't bother with MK7 to be personally, or natto or anything like that, especially if you're European ancestry. Not going to really be good for you or useful. Okay, that's more JoJo stuff. I need to find out what the hell that is. Okay, K2 plus equal, no, nope. Yeah, I explained it earlier. Nope, that's just menaquinone of K2. So it's a subcategory. You could call it that. That's, I suspect, for the JoJo stuff. What the fuck is this JoJo stuff? I've got to look at it. Now you got me going. Joe. The JoJo rabbit. Oh. JoJo Simmer ice cream. Why isn't this working for? Good for her. Is this what you're talking about? This. Now, children. I'm really concerned about you. This is what you're telling me you're watching while you're having ice cream, that is. Okay. Must be a new thing. I'll have to get into it. Get the ice cream out. Is the antibody treatment better? Let me find out what I'm talking. Make sure, because all these things. So what does it include? Is it something new, or is it, because look, different countries have different sort of names for them, and I haven't been involved in childhood type vaccines for years, so so I'm not really sure which ones you're actually talking about. I usually say things like, measles and stuff like that you should do. There are certain things you should do. There are certain things are not necessary. Anything that won't kill you is probably a waste of time. You might as well get normal immunity, like the flu, stuff like that. Unless you're in a high risk group, that's different. That there you may need to consider, like I had the flu thing this year because, underlying health conditions, stuff like that, not prepared to take the risk, So next year, probably not. But this year, I said, do I want to get basically corona and the flu at the same time? Could that kill me? So I was too scared. So basically I did it, bit the bullet. So yeah, call me scaredy pants. But yeah, yeah, I don't know about this type, because I actually tried to Google something and it just gave me some googly goop stuff that made no sense. So Pim gives its original context to any ideas. Love her streams. Yep, she's pretty good, in that regard. And I mean, on a lot of views, we're pretty much similar. We prefer to see better vaccination, sort of different methods that actually are more the natural type, where you just spray and it induces sort of the normal sort of stuff that your body would induce, and other things like that. Probably where I would, I don't think there's a lot of difference. I don't think there's a lot of difference there, because basically, we do consider certain vaccines are necessary because they really stop a lot of disease, which is, if you get it, it can kill you or really cause a lot of health issues. And then there are others that probably aren't as necessary, so it's a mixed bag in that regard. If you were to space them out over time, maybe it'd be less of an issue. I think there is a big issue compared to what the young kids are getting nowadays, being hammered to the level. I think they need to space it out somehow, do it differently. I'm not sure, I think that if we went to an option where we had a sprayable type, it would be much better. But, these are the sort of things we need to campaign as a people, not only as a community, but as a people, to campaign and say, look, we want better. And we want, if the private sector doesn't, because the private sector doesn't want to do the investments. And you know why? Simple. They don't make a lot of profits out of these. Most research, they get actually research grants to look into antibiotics and into basically vaccines. They don't do them themselves because it's a one shot per person and that's it. There's no follow on, where chronic disease, that's profitable, because basically you've got somebody on blood pressure tablets from, possibly from the age of 40 right through to his death. That's multiple decades of good profit. So that's the reason why, there's that difference. So I would say that, look, we need to be a bit more nuanced about those sort of things, why and stuff like that. And there are better options. But as I said, I haven't seen the entire live stream. I need to see it before. I don't like commenting. I'll comment. You can ask me next week, and I'll actually make proper comments then when I've actually seen it. Because I don't know what that other academic said, and I saw some things at the end, and some things seemed plausible, and some things didn't seem as plausible, and even Pim was basically a bit uncertain about some of the stuff that she was saying. So I'd have to look at them, and then I could argue specifically, because I know a number of the arguments that anti-vaxxers put out there. And some of them are credible in terms of, the frequency that's done on younger children. But some of the others are completely bonkers. So, in that regard. And a lot of the stuff that's in those vaccines are at trace level so low that if you were to sit behind a vehicle, the exhaust from the vehicle, you would get far more particulates ingested in your body and have far more negative reaction, and your body would respond to, than what is in some of the vaccines. I just think that there are better ways of actually producing them. But sort of an unnecessary. I don't want to use the word unnecessary evil, but they are sort of. If you compare history with today, and look at the sort of the communicable diseases and the sort of health ramifications and the destruction of life and death that happened in the past before these things existed, when I compare to that, it's night and day. Yes, we can point to a lot of issues regarding these sort of things, and sort of industry practices like misuse of antibiotics in agriculture and stuff like that. Yep, I agree with all that sort of stuff, but that's a political issue, and that's a political thing where people need to campaign and actually have these practices stopped, where veterinaries only use antibiotics when they have to, like a doctor would use with a human. A veterinary doctor would use antibiotics with an animal that actually was really sick and needed it, not because they basically got in the feedlot, dumping and putting a whole lot of corn down its throat, and they basically want to maintain, deal with the pathogens that its gut microbiome is generating because of this shit. There are differences between the two, and this is where, even with some of the veg-tards, probably probably not the militant ones, but with some of the more reasonable ones, and we could collaborate to basically get better ethical agriculture and clear out all this misuse of antibiotics in agriculture and stuff like that, unless it's necessary. For veterinary, for cases where animals really need them. So these are difficult topics and discussions, but we still have to have them, and we have to, understand that if we were to go vaccine back antibiotics free, there'd be a lot of people sick and a lot of people dying on this planet. So we have to consider that side of the coin as well, which we don't, because we sit in our, hermetically sealed homes with all the modern comms and electricity and everything else that we've got in the last 100 years. And we can sit around basically bitching about these things because we don't have any historical perspective or experience, But when you look back, when you really look back, you go, oh, shit. And here's some of the stories, people talking and telling about the stories about polio and stuff like that. You go, oh, shit. Maybe Harry's making a point. Okay, I've got to move. I've been really slow. Not sure about that witch stuff. I have 5 grams. I'm dying of everything right. You're what? 5 grams of what? Not sure. Send me an email. Tell me what your issues are, so I've got an idea. Because, I do want to respect your privacy. If things are that bad, let me know. My friend has a huge list of studies that back up EMF being bad. Yeah, email them to me. Yep, just email them to me. I haven't found anything. Yep, just send them to me so I can look at them, and look at how they actually conducted them as well, which is really important because I haven't seen anything. I know blue light's an issue. If they're blue light related, yep. But if they're not blue light related, probably not. There's plenty of radiation around us constantly, from the solar system, from the sun, from interstellar space, high energetic particles that penetrate our atmosphere. There's plenty of stuff around us, not only the non-native EMFs, but whether there's a threshold that our body can't handle, that's a different issue, but we don't have the long-term studies. And even when you put cell lines under intense exposure, you don't get any, when you're actually putting it in a closed where it's bouncing around and you're getting a lot of, you should have, if you're basically getting oxidative stress and people are saying you get oxidative stress, where's the heat shock proteins being activated? Not happening. Where's the genotoxicity? Where's the damage to the DNA? It's not there. So is there another mechanism? Potentially. But I haven't seen any good credible arguments or data, and that's what really is. Opinions, if it's an opinion piece, like the one that actually Frank Tufano was pushing out, that's nonsense. That's an opinion piece with zero credibility. I mean, one of the guys was actually an intelligence officer. What the fuck would an ex-military intelligence officer know about electronics? How they work. If he was an engineer, yeah, probably would. But somebody who's basically just an intelligence analyst, basically no different than, that's done an arts degree and basically got into intelligence, what the hell does that person know about how, has no idea about physics? Because this is really, when it comes down to it, it has to do with physics. You have to have knowledge in physics to be able to discuss these things in a very highly technical way. Even engineers may understand how to put stuff together and how to create it, but physicists really know, especially biophysicists, really know how certain physical things or certain things around us, how they react and interact with biology. All the stuff that actually came out with the blue light, with the relationship of all these different elements, deuterium, blue light, all these sort of things, a lot of it came out of Eastern Europe, even right back to the 1960s, and pretty much these people were doing cutting edge science, and they weren't working for any company. They just basically wanted to know how things work so they could actually understand how these things worked and how they could actually develop devices to kill people. So they really want to know how these things work inside the body and how different things work, and how things interact. So they did cutting edge science. So I've looked at all that sort of stuff, But all the other opinion pieces that, especially the American opinion pieces and all that are done by naturopathic doctors and all sorts of other people that are coming out and doing all these sort of nonsense opinion pieces, zero science, no different than the BS shit that basically Frank Tufano was peddling, that basically Bart just blew away. It's opinion pieces. It's nothing. It's like in nutrition, like the plant-based nutritionists that come out with all their nonsense. It's just opinions. It means zero. It's only data that actually counts. If you've got credible data that actually shows an actual causal link, actually shows that certain things, that basically DNA breaks, DNA strands break, that there is quite clear damage that is actually happening to organic matter, yeah, I'd love to see that. But if it's opinions, no, don't waste my time. I've read plenty of opinions and they're all basically just bonkers, absolute bonkers and shit. They actually have no evidence to back up any of their arguments. No different than Hellman that turned up, had nothing to offer, but just basically comments, opinions. At least I had some science to back up what I was saying. He had nothing. Zero. So, as I said, I don't take risks, and I try to minimize, because maybe there is something there, but I could be deluded. I could be wrong. That's why I use Ethernet. But, I could be completely wrong, and that wireless box there, I could turn it on. It wouldn't cause me any issues. But too many of these things, is it a good thing? I don't know. I just don't take the risk. And I'm more concerned, and the reason why I've got it turned off is more for the night, because of the blue light, is because of that part of the spectrum and the photons that are actually emitted at those frequencies. That is where I'm concerned in the evening. I don't want that in my environment, so I limit it, So just because I'm limiting you in the daytime, it's a bonus. Whether it does anything positive or negative, I have no idea, and I've got no proof either way. So that's going to be a personal choice you have to make yourself, with no evidence. Say, well, I'm not willing to take a risk, so I'm just going to keep that out of my life. That's fine. I've got no problems with that. When a person argues that point and says, I've got no evidence, all I've got is opinions of people, and but I find those people credible, fine. You want to follow them, that's fine. You want to agree with them. But I don't have any evidence that I can actually back up. But I'm hedging my bet each way and basically limiting to some degree. I'm not going out of my way to limit, but to some degree. So, just in case, maybe in 5 years' time, somebody will come up with something better. But I haven't seen anything better. And I've seen so many studies on this, and really good studies, like the Japanese ones, but also other European ones and all that. The only reason I use the Japanese ones because they were done on the eye, and the eye is one of the most sensitive of those cells. They dump, very easily, if they're under stress or whatever. So you lose DHA. And so, they're the ones that are going to, your other parts of your cell lines are not going to be affected as much as eyes. Eyes are much more sensitive to different spectrums of light and stuff like that. And we know that, because that's why we suffer macular degeneration, all these sort of issues with our eyes in the future. So, and that's why I focused on those specific studies, because, if there was something there, even something minor, we would see it in those cell lines. But we didn't. So, yeah, that's all I can say on that subject. Yeah. 40 and 60 gigahertz, the millimeter wave bands, the ones that they say are the worst, because a lot of the other frequencies, which is like 5 gigahertz and all that, we've had for years, 2.5 to 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz we've had with routers in our homes for years. So it's that's, and a lot of the, like the, what is it called, the 4G LTE, some of those work in those higher in those frequencies as well. So we've already had years of those frequencies. What we haven't had is the millimeter ones. That means the 40 and 60 gigahertz range, sort of where you've got all these cell towers all over the place. And that's where that's where I focused my study, where I've actually done my research primarily on, because that's the ones that they're basically saying, well, they don't exist and all. But But if you go back, they were making the same claims about 3G, 2G, and 4G. So these are not new claims. Each time and then they say, oh, no, this time it's going to be worse each time. And I'm going, hold on. Those waves are actually shorter each time and they have less penetration. So they penetrate the tissue far less each time. And that's why they need to put more cell towers around, because they've got such poor penetration. You can go around a corner and you lose completely signal. And I'm going, if you're losing penetration into the actual soft tissue of your body, and it's going down with all these generations, how are they worse? And when you pose this to them, because they've got no friggin' idea about physics, when you pose this to them, they run and hide. Each time. I mean, I had a similar argument on which one was it? The one that Frank's, where Bart was having a go, and there's some guy that was basically eventually, because he was being disrespectful and and making some crude remarks and even being anti-carnivore, some remarks like that. Bart just banned him. I noticed in the end, I didn't ask him to do anything like that. And I'm glad that he left all the comments, because I'd actually typed a whole lot of stuff in there. People can go and take a look at it and see the arguments that this person was posing. And I said, show me the evidence. He had nothing. He goes to these crackpots and listens to them, but they have no evidence. It's just opinions. And then he comes back to me and tries to argue with no. And I say, well, where is it? I think his name was Rue Baba or whatever. Yes. So I told that little brat to basically either cough up or shut up, because he had nothing in that regard, and he was being very disrespectful and very nasty, especially towards the end. So when people lose the argument, they become nasty when they've got no evidence in particular. It's a bit like those vegans get very nasty because they've got zero evidence for their argument. Yeah, very much the same. There's a big difference between government grade and consumer 5G. Exactly. Oh yeah, 5 grams. Yeah, sorry. My brain, yeah. Lack of sleep. Going late to bed. That's why I got up late for Pim's thing. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, losing it today, aren't I? Need Jared here to keep me in line. Yeah, look, precisely. It's the argument. It's a smoke screen. Yep. Look, consumer grade with military grade, and that's what you mean by government grade. Military grade is completely different. They are focusing deliberately the beam of energy, and it's basically like a particle weapon. So to basically cause harm. They want to kill people. They want to put it in, in sort of creating lasers and stuff like that to basically focus this sort of energy to basically kill people. Yep, that's what they're, that's the different, that's military application. These are civilian applications. They don't want to kill their clients. They want to exploit their clients. That's different, but they don't want to kill them. So it's not a good business model if you kill your clients. How about the night light in windows? Yep, look, as I said, blue light's bad. If you basically want to get dementia in later age, ignore the blue light issue. I wouldn't. I would get blue blocking glasses. And I would also, if I'm walking around in a place where there's a lot of LEDs, I would not, even in the summer when it's nice and warm and all that, I'd have long sleeves in that sort of environment to try and minimize the amount of exposure in that regard. Yeah. So I think blue light's a big issue. And it's, people are jumping on this sort of EMF stuff and they don't realize that most, because you think about blue light, you got all these advertising in the cities. You go, all these lights, traffic lights. There's so much infrastructure with light around. To replace all that and change it would cost trillions of dollars. If certain frequencies were a problem, you could actually just change the spectrum and use other frequencies. It doesn't cost much, But if you want to basically rip all this sort of infrastructure out, all the light bulbs, everything and all that, it's going to cost trillions. Maybe the EMF thing is a misdirect in order to avoid the blue light issue, which is a real big issue. That's basically meaning that you're not getting deep sleep. You're more stressed. You're more anxious in the mornings. You're basically not clearing out those, proteins. You're setting yourself up for more dementia, and all these other issues. So yeah, so maybe that's maybe that's why it's like the UFO thing that hides the stealth technology. And I've always said the UFOs are just nutters that are misdirect nutters. And I think the EMFers are also charlatan misdirectors from the real problems. The UFO thing was hiding the stealth technology. It's a really good idea from the CIA to basically have everybody running after UFOs and ignoring the all these advanced military technologies. So it's a misdirect on that front. Then the other thing is when it came to things like things that have to do with EMF, same thing, to ignore the blue light issue. When it comes to basically, the diet side is again for the same reason to basically, the saturated fat issue is the same sort of issue. All these are basically, ways of basically focusing people's attention on other things, not the real problems. And the real problems are basically that our society, our whole world is literally lit up with too much blue light. And to basically mitigate that would cost trillions of dollars. And that would be very difficult to do. Politically, try and campaign against that. Very hard. G'day, Honest. Good to see you here. So, I think people have been sucked into the wrong causes. It's a bit like the vegans and saving the environment. They've been sucked into the wrong causes as well and are used by the food industry. And now they're even campaigning openly for fake meats and stuff like that. We know they're full of vegetable oils, full of trans fats and toxic oils, and they're campaigning for them. They're promoting them to the general public. And the vegans are out there popularizing these foods. You don't need regular meat. You can go for this. And this is the problem. These groups are basically, follow whose interest this is. Blue light's a big issue, and it's not easy to mitigate because it would cost far too much. At the end of the day, when it comes to let me put it this way, there's a competing technology which is called fiber optic. If basically a lot of these cablers, I used to be a cabler and I lost my income when wireless came out. There's more money to be made for the big end for certain corporations. They can make more money on wireless. On certain other corporations in the world, they can make more money on cabling, on Ethernet, this sort of stuff. If wireless was so bad, and these guys could prove it, that EMF was bad, they would be basically out there creating study after study, promoting that, that this is better and that's bad, and they would try and prove it, but it's not happening. So I just think it's the whole EMF debate is a bit of a misdirect. except the blue light component. That's not. But they don't talk about that. That's the stuff that I talk about, that Jack talks about that, and a few other people talk about that specifically. But these guys are just talking about, EMF in general. Our bodies are designed around very big electromagnetic fields. The whole planet generates, a magnetosphere, massive, So if our bodies can actually withstand that sort of level of electromagnetic fields, I think the rest of us, here he is. I think the rest of us, g'day mate, the rest of us more than capable of doing that. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to be here.
We were concerned. I was concerned. Is he in Guantanamo Bay for milk rustling across the border? Oh, he got back from the US.
No,
I don't want to know details because the authorities are listening in.
I was socializing with a friend because the law was just changed that we're allowed to have one buddy household.
Okay.
So our benevolent overlords have seen fit to allow us to socialize slightly.
Nice.
So I just got to hang out with somebody I haven't seen in a while.
That's good. Yeah, why not?
And then I got home and I needed to get my vitamin A and vitamin K2 and MK4 form and some eggs with extra yolks.
Oh, sounds perfect.
And then I was just about to hop on stream and I remembered the tongue lashing I got last time for looking disheveled, so I had to throw on a blazer before I joined the stream this time.
Somebody has to keep up the standards. I'm not.
Yeah, so the ball's in your court on that one now.
Oh God, you'd be pushing shit uphill. If only miracles could happen. I think even a lot of my subscribers have given up. Yeah, look at him. Look how scruffy, that old man is. Actually, my hair's been bloody growing recently quite fast. Because I've been taking some of the zinc supplements as well. Not a lot, just like one. Whenever I go out, I sort of put it on my mouth and I go for a walk, just to basically provide a bit of protection to my respiratory system. But my hair's been growing a bit faster, and the biggest problem is you can't get a cut because they're all closed. They're all shut down.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should go for the glam rock look or the skinhead look.
Yeah, I'll probably end up looking like Frankie. By the time they open up the business again.
Just a second. Sorry, these headphones aren't very comfortable, but my hat's not too bad as a pad.
That's it. Looks good.
It goes well with the blazer.
Yeah, you look like one of those radio commentators.
There you go.
Yes, the traditional style we're used to. See, it's not all gone. I better get back into this stream. Where am I? There I am. Come down. Yeah, it's pretty bad in the US. Yes, there's too many vested interests, unfortunately. They don't do as good science as they used to do in the past in the US. In some fields, they still do good science, like in physics, chemistry, and certain other things like that. But nutrition and some of the others where there's big industry lobby, it's pretty piss poor. And that's why I avoid even, as I said, the telecommunication studies as well. I stick to Asia, Europe, because they're done better. And also, they have credibility. That means when I use those to argue my point that, that non-native EMFs are not as bad as people make out to be, then, I've got good credible arguments. But the thing is, there's still those frequencies, which is the blue spectrum photons, those So you can't have it open on at night. You've got to have all that sort of stuff at a minimal. Daytime, even in the mornings, are not a good idea. It's really the highest level of blue light is only in the midday, basically noon. That's when it's really high, and that's fine. You just bathe yourself. I mean, you just turn on your mobile phone and do this. Just bathe yourself with blue light. I've got no problems, at that time of the day. But, later on, especially in the evenings, if you want a good sleep, you got to get that melatonin up. Because, as I said, the thing that I fear the most for people is, dementia in later age, because they're not getting that deep sleep. They're not clearing out those proteins, which they need to do. And I think blue light and screen exposure at night and all that is a problem. I think that's where the real problem is, all our lights and all that. And that is trillions and trillions of dollars to mitigate. So all these misdirects with 5G and all that, I was saying this earlier to the guys, that as you go to these different spectrums, the penetration, because it's shorter range, the wave, the electromagnetic wave that is generated out of these devices, it's shorter, it has less penetration. That's why they have to put more towers up. And with less penetration, less of an issue. Let alone I did the stuff with Bart that I was talking about earlier, just to bring you up to scratch. Oh well, Neil. Oh yes, exactly. That's right. The end of the world. The world would be sucked in to a black hole, and we'd all die. I remember that. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there that people come up with. I'm the one who told Hellman about blue blocking glass. Oh, did you? Okay, good for you. Good for you.
I need to order myself a pair of those, actually.
Yeah, I thought that he took my suggestion, but good. Yeah, that's a good one, Necro Kitty. I didn't realise. I thought he basically saw me doing it continuously and then decided he'd do it himself. Anyway, at least you were able to push him. At least he's, looking after himself in that way. That's one thing positive in his life. Yes, he did, and not only with Bart, with me and many others. You can't call people Satanists and all sorts of nasty things and all that, and then expect people to be friendly to you. I mean, I forgive him. I'm not nasty, but at the same time, I'm not interested in his friendship, in any friendship, because basically it's just poisonous. I don't need people like that in my life.
Yeah, I hope he feels better.
Yes, pretty much. But hope. Yeah, look, I don't feel. I have no. G'day, Richard. I have no basically ill feelings towards him. Even though he said some nasty things. In my.
Well,
but it's life's too short to hold grudges. That's how I
think he sort of rubbed up against the, sort of like the aggressive dogma that you encounter with the medical establishment eating the way that we do. And I think he sort of ran up on that encounter at a particularly sensitive time for
maybe
questioning authority structures and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but that's I mean, it's like not all authority structures are bad.
No.
I mean, I get on with my priest down here quite well. There's other, you know what I mean? There are authority structures in all sorts of things. A teacher, is an authority structure. There are plenty of authority structures and good
competence
people.
Hierarchies.
Precisely. There are also people like human rights, people in certain organisations that basically fight for human rights and stuff like that. They're also an authority and they're good people, so, just doing a blanket type, this black and white thing, will just end up getting you into, it doesn't end well. Let's put it that way. I don't really know much about Lyme, to be honest. I know that it is a condition that actually has some science behind it. But there are also some conditions that people are attributing to Lyme that are not Lyme. That could be potentially something else, but I don't know what it is. Whether it's basically a hypersensitivity of some sort, whether it's basically a poor redox potential, the inability to basically, produce enough energy to clear out things and do things, whether it's some sort of other dysfunction, because sometimes people have certain dysfunctions and then they don't realize it's a liver problem, that they have certain genetics that they're not basically, they need more choline, or they may need more MK4 or other things to actually get things to work. And the symptoms are similar, but you can't find anything. So, these are really hard things unless somebody goes through with you and literally tries to work out what it could be in that regard. So I don't doubt that there are some people that actually do have Lyme's disease. It is a real condition, but whether it's as pervasive as some people claim it is, that I don't know. And anybody that actually argues that with insufficient evidence is really either a crackpot, or they've got a vested interest in some way in this argument. They may be in an association which wants to basically make it more important, popular, so there's more government funding that goes towards it, like people do with all sorts of things, like whether with certain cancers, whether it's cervical cancer or this or whatever. All ailments have, to somebody who's actually being affected by it, they have an importance. And so they will try and make that far more important in the public discourse to basically get more funding. But doesn't mean that basically, and this is where, it's very dangerous to slip into pseudo scientific thinking when we basically allow sort of politics and opinions to basically overwhelm our thinking. You need to always step back and say, yep, there may be some people and all that. Can it actually be dealt with in another way? I think diet has a lot to do with a lot of ailments and how robust your body is, your immune system, to be able to respond to these things. So I think that a lot of people, and I know some areas on the New South Wales coast in the state of New South Wales in Australia, people know that, where Sydney is, to the north of that sort of area, where apparently there's a lot of Lyme disease. But also there is high levels of vegetarianism and veganism in that area as well. So do you know what I'm getting at? What I'm saying is, I'm not saying that all these people don't have Lyme's disease, or maybe because of their poor diet, they're more susceptible to Lyme's, So I don't know, because I haven't done any research. But what I'm saying is that these people could be because of that. Do you know anything about much more? Because it's not an area that I've really looked into.
No, I don't know much about it,
Yep.
other than it's something that in my lifetime I've seen go from... I've seen the medical establishment sort of do a 180 on it, I guess, where there used to be a lot of doubt from physicians about whether it was a real condition or not.
Yeah, I sort of remember in the past, a decade ago, that basically they didn't believe it.
Yeah.
But now it's well established that it is.
Yeah.
Where the differences is nowadays, that some people think that it's not as widespread, or people that are thinking or think that they've got Lyme's actually have some other condition.
Right, some sort of, or a comorbidity of some kind, maybe.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be a fairly broad spectrum of the severity.
And yeah, it's sort of real hard. The bite from a Lone Star tick can cause people to develop allergy to red meat. Oh, so it does exist in the US as well. Okay, so because we've got a sort of tick in Australia that does do the same thing. You can desensitize yourself over time to the tick and sort of reverse that, but it takes some effort, and it's forced people to go to things like to chicken, to seafood, to other things.
So, sorry, how would you reverse that allergy?
It basically, like any other allergy, you basically reduce the amount of dose. So you give them like a bit of the tick thing, and you reduce it in order for the body to get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of cope. I know that there's a guy at work that he's got some sort of ailment from some sort of similar, it's not this tick, it's a different type of thing, and he's basically been desensitized over time. It's taken him quite some time. It's not a thing that happens very quickly, unfortunately. For certain, and I have no idea about the Lone Star tick, so I couldn't actually tell you. But for the type of one down here, it can take a number of years. So it's, yeah. And the thing is, in areas where you're prone to have these ticks around, what they say is do not rub them or don't try to pull them off. What you're supposed to do is basically use like one of those sprays, those cryogenic type sprays, like a spray where you freeze it, like that. It's got some name, I can't remember it. And you sort of freeze it off. When it actually freezes and hardens, then it just sort of drops off very easily. So you don't end up with that the stinger staying inside and creating an allergic reaction or whatever.
Right. I've heard of using dish soap for a similar reason, that it will just asphyxiate the tick quickly, and they let go when they die.
Okay, I didn't know that. So anyway, there you go, guys. Another tip.
I don't know if it works or not. I've seen people say it does.
Oh, they can try it. If it doesn't work, then they can go down to their pharmacy and get one of those sort of sprays to sort of deal with it that way, rather than trying to pull it off. You do not want to pull those off. Yep. Tickies can make allergic to beef. Yep. Yeah, there's a Aussie tick as well. Yep, in New South Wales in particular. But there's also some other sort of little, there's a variety of tick in Tasmania as well. I don't know how that. Somebody told me that they are actually slightly closely related, but they're different. I don't know the name. So, yeah, but that's what my friend had, and he's basically been doing, this sort of going to the Royal Hobart Hospital, and they've got a special clinic where they do these sort of desensitization type rounds each time to basically slowly reduce the sensitivity that you've got. So it's like and I know this other person as well, and he's basically got a similar one, but he's got it with, I can't remember whether it's bees or wasps. It's one of the two. And he's also going through this sort of thing to be desensitized to either the bee or the wasp. I'll have to ask him. I can't remember now which one it is. It's one of the two. So yeah, so there's a lot of that sort of stuff, and I suspect there's other people out there. Yeah. Exactly. More about Hellman. Stumbled on, look, that sort of stuff should never be done by amateurs that have no idea about religious doctrine or basically how to look at those sort of things, because basically, that's not for an amateur that has no idea, when you're looking at basically these sort of symbols and all that, it's not even done very much by, I know the Greek Orthodox faith, there are certain people that are basically theologians that work for the church that look into these issues, religious matters, but there are also priests, specific priests, or bishops appoint specific committees to look into these things, and they have certain texts which goes right back to the early part of the church, and they are the ones that they basically use to look at these sort of issues in terms of satanic whatever. People like Luke have got no understanding how these things work and how they use them and how they interpret things. So they shouldn't be basically mucking around with that sort of stuff anyway, because they're not for the layman. A layman religious person should be basically looking at trying to improve themselves and become a better person and a more loving person, and be less involved in basically throwing stones at other people and looking into these sort of areas, these dark force areas, and should be looking at moving more closer to the light and away from darkness, if he wants to be a good Christian, as he says, he claims, so yes. Yep. Look, I don't really know enough about the US ticks, and so I couldn't actually really say about the US ticks. I have to be very, careful what I say. But I know enough about the Australian ones. Maybe they're similar. I have no idea. I just lost my point. I have no idea whether they're even related to each other. Who knows?
Bart just popped in.
Yeah, Bart's in the chat, I just noticed.
Hey, Bart.
Let me find my spot. That's what I love about StreamYard. One accidental mistype. It's not coming up. Anyway, so let me just move further down here. Okay. Didn't like them. Something about some food. Okay. Later friend of mine, heavily into physics, is an electronic design engineer, and will be puzzled by the current 5G discussion if he was around. Yes, very much. That's the weird stuff. Where 5G has less penetration and a shorter wave length than 4G that's got more penetration, and people are talking about the end of the world. It's just nonsense. Yeah, look, I'm not surprised that your mate would have would be saying, he'd be aghast, and that. So, thank you, honest. Yep. An opinion. Yes. There's all sorts of extremists in all camps, unfortunately, in that regard. I just say to people, yes, we can produce, like what Pim was saying earlier, we could produce basically better vaxes, which are sprayable type to get, the normal inducing the sort of immune response and stuff like that. There are better ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. There are better ways with sanitation. We can get rid of fluoride and start using UVC to basically kill off pathogens and other methods. There's a lot of things we could be doing differently. But while these cause some issues, like fluoride, you can actually add more iodine in your diet and displace that fluoride and sort of mitigate to some extent. You can also, if you're a smart carnivore, you can hydrate yourself with more fat rather than water. And so basically that's another way to sort of mitigate that sort of issue, which we've talked about before, about the deuterium side of things, how to deal with that. But when it comes to history, and you look back at history, they had leprosy colonies before antibiotics, up until the early parts of the 20th century. Polio was rampant. All these diseases were rampant and killing millions, these communicable diseases. you know. So things were really bad before the pre-antibiotics, pre-vaccination periods. So, and that's what we need to remember. Need to really hammer that through and all that. Now, we also need to campaign against the misuse of antibiotics in livestock. We need to campaign against that because that's wrong. That's what's creating a lot of resistance. The majority of antibiotics are not being used on humans, being used on livestock to fatten them up in feedlots. And they're being used in livestock farming also to protect them against all the grain shit that they're feeding them. That's what we need to stop. The only place that for a vaccine is when a veterinary scientist, doctor, uses basically the vaccine or antibiotic on an animal that basically is sick and needs it. Otherwise, they should be just out there eating grass and living, a nice life and providing us with good quality meat. That's what they should be doing. But there's a place for everything, and we need to be very careful not to become extremists. But what we need to do is campaign and say, okay, we need these things, but we need better quality stuff. It's like we go, we need better quality food, we need better quality vaccinations, we need better quality, and we need investments in those things, and we need to bar the misuse of those things with legislation and all that, not have legislation which allows it to happen. So that's where the issue is. So that's where our campaigns are to be. When you've got the anti-vax sort of campaign, what it does, it's a misdirect because it doesn't keep them honest.
Yeah, it's there's hardly a more polarizing issue right now than that exact debate because of the way it's framed as just there's either science denier, anti-vaxxer, or you are completely trusting of all medical authority. And too often there's no room for, I don't know. I get concerned
the
that
middle ground.
Expressing any doubt at all about the safety or efficacy of any vaccine formulation, you're immediately disregarded as an anti-vaxxer, right? And that's not how people learn, and that's not how you have an honest discussion, by limiting acceptable opinion. But I guess vaccines aren't the only issue affected by that these days.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like even though for certain things that like measles and stuff like that, or things that are really nasties that can kill you, cause you a lot of issues, I have vaccinated and would vaccinate.
And things that we've had vaccines for quite some time, and we know that the vaccines that we use are safe.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly. So the new corona vaccine, if that comes out, I probably won't use it.
It's just because it's been rushed to market.
Precisely. It hasn't been tested properly. It potentially could have a lot of side effects. The Japanese one actually causes some level of, potential sterility. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about really, and they're saying they're really looking at it, and they may come up with a different type of approach or formulation. I'm going, I don't want to be anywhere near that sort of stuff unless, because I know that high fructose corn syrup came out of Japanese research. So not everything that comes out of Japanese research is necessarily good. But you know what they do? They bring it out, they realize it doesn't work, and they ban it from their own country, and they actually then they actually sell it to somebody else to use and sell the license to the Americans who bought it because they could make profits out of it. So they still get licensing fees. Crazy world we live in.
Every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it does.
Yes, exactly. We'll go down. That was in regards to what we've already discussed. Now let's get back to Kitty. What she says. I reduce my EMF exposure to only be calm because if I fall asleep next to my cell phone, I don't have a good night's sleep. Yep. It's, as I said, the photons of the blue spectrum, from all these sort of things. So in the daytime, you can bathe yourself with blue light, not an issue. But at night, it's an issue because you're basically, you're causing yourself to reduce the amount of melatonin you produce. You're suppressing melatonin production. And that's where I think we're going to have a disaster in the future with all these screens that basically are emitting all this blue light, and dementia rates are going to go up. We're not clearing out. We're not getting deep sleep. We're not healing enough. We're not clearing out all that garbage, that protein garbage in our head. It's not looking like a good. And there's science behind that. It's not woo-woo stuff, like a lot of the EMFers, which are charlatan woo-woo people. That's what I'm calling them now. EMFers, I call them. Charlatans on steroids. That's another one.
Well, I need to get some blue block glasses just because I think they would be quite stylish with my hat and blazer.
They would. Yes, I do remember. We're all going to die, end up dead as a doornail back then. Seems like these things, they're like they go around in circles. I actually showed that study that I showed with Bart on Bart's round table had to do with 40 gigahertz and 60 gigahertz, both. So both millimeter wave sort of frequencies, both, not one, both. So, yes, you're putting more energy in, but the wave is much shorter. The energy is for the bandwidth, so you can actually put more data. But basically the penetration into tissue is much lower than what 4G was or 3G or the previous one. The longer wavelengths, they penetrate much deeper and travel further. So, and, the big magnetosphere of the planet, now that is massive, and that friggin' penetrates everything and anything on this planet. So, yeah, let's keep it in perspective. And we're not talking about militarized stuff either, that's different. Yeah, I use Ethernet as well. Yep. I think our world is overloaded with a lot of frequencies, and how good or bad that is, there's a lot of question marks on that. There's plenty of blue photons that are being emitted by these sort of things. So, you definitely don't want them in the evening. So, but at the end of the day, we need to look at a lot of things in our homes. Light bulbs, there are actual light bulbs that, can mitigate that. I'm actually, like we've got with transition glasses, like you've got with transition glasses, I'm hoping in the future that some company comes up with, maybe an LED light that sort of transitions through the day, like it would if you're out in the sun, that would really be good, So, because a lot of people now have to work in offices, have to work indoors. And if you had something like that transitioned, it would make it much healthier office environment and work environment and home environment. So, is there any engineers out there that are on my YouTube that are getting any ideas? You can make a lot of money.
Do you think it's possible for these screens to be just put out those beneficial wavelengths in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, if engineers really got down to it and worked on the problem, because we've already got, if you think about it, we've got software that can sort of do it. I don't think that it's beyond our engineering capacity at this stage. I think we could do it. But it's a question of will. And maybe even, you don't really need to do it in hardware. You could potentially just do it in software, but in a smarter, different way. Maybe you may have to redesign the screen slightly so it could actually have different layers that could actually be, engaged at certain times of the day in different ways. So, because because you've got that that backlit type thing, and that has a lot of the blue light frequencies as well. And there are ways of, especially with organic LEDs, where you can turn that completely off, and you can actually control pixel by pixel the different type of light frequencies and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there are technological ways and better software and stuff like that. It's a question of basically, we the consumers pushing industry and demanding something like that, going onto their website and typing away and say, what are you doing to mitigate my blue the blue blocking spectrum health issue to myself as a consumer of your product? And so if people started to do that and started bombarding these companies and saying, well, what are you doing to mitigate these sort of things, they'd have to basically listen. Because if there's a big interest out there, they'll start, they'll be forced to basically do something.
So when it comes to blue light blocking glasses, what do you look for? Should they be the full orangey yellow lens, or do you think the ones that advertise just certain coatings or whatever?
Look, I use basically, I have clear ones, but I think the other ones are much better, but they are a bit more pricier in that regard. The ones that that some people get are, what are they called? Eagle type or something like that. I can't remember the actual name. It's on one of my links on one of the somebody asked me to give him all the different varieties. Let me just see whether I can find it. And so these ones basically are sort of a high-end type, which basically also cover not blue spectrum, but also the green spectrum as well. So they are but they are pricey. You're looking at about $100 a pair, compared to some of the average, which is a couple of dollars. So the question is, how much you're willing to fork? And if you've got a number of members of family, it may not be an easy thing to do in that regard. So it depends on I think it's this one here. No, it wasn't that one. Must be an earlier one. Yes, trying to find these comments. Let's move until we... Oops. That's a lot of discussion about people having... More about, yep. Still got more... Ever had any headaches and stuff like that yourself, Jared?
Yeah, I used to get migraines every so often from the time I was in the first time I had one was in 7th grade. They were really severe while I was going through puberty, to the point that I would get nauseous. But then as I grew out of it, they sort of decreased with frequency. But they were usually still pretty painful, even though I'd only get one every maybe 6 months. And now I'm down to I only had one while I was doing keto, and it was quite manageable. And then I've had one or two in the 20 months that I've been carnivore, and they've been the most manageable I've ever had. So both the frequency is decreasing and the intensity is also decreasing with them. To the point that I can sort of just sit and wait for it to pass for 20 minutes or so. I don't need to take Advil or anything like that for it. But I do get really crazy visual disruptions from it, very sort of psychedelic geometry, but black and white strobing usually. and usually only like one part of my vision. But yeah, so I have had migraines, and I have also seen it improve with diet changes.
Anyway, I've just found the one here. It's actually the Euro Live on stream on the 4th of April, and I don't know where was it? Oh, blue. Here it is. And this one was here. So it was Luke Gagnon. He basically asked me about blue blocking, and I've actually put a link here. So there's, let me just, oops, what am I doing? Is that icon changed? Why the bloody hell did that do? Oh, whatever. I'll just zoom in a bit. Okay, so there's, oops. Okay. So it's basically, that's the sort of our cheapo type stuff. And different types. These are like prescription types, so you can actually get like different, like percentages, especially if people have presbyopia, like they have difficulty reading and stuff like that. This is the sort of low to high, so you can go through them in that regard. And if we go to this one here, so we'll change it to the highest priced ones. So these are the Nightfall Elite types that you sort of, these are the sort of types that some people are wearing. And so these are 100% blue and green blocking ones for $100. There's one for people that are basically need like fit over. So if they already have, and there are these ones as well that are sort of a different style. They're all about $99. Those ones.
Yeah, it would seem logical to me that you would want to. That I would want to see like an orange or red lens in it. Some of them you see they're kind of like a yellow or even like a greenish yellow lens, and that wouldn't, just from color theory, that wouldn't block all of the. You want like sort of the edge of green.
Well, you've got
purple blocked, right?
That's right. Well, the blue part starts at about 430 onwards in terms of nanometers. So this part, the sort of the 380 to the 430 is sort of the green part.
Right.
So that's, I think it's that way or the other way around, one of the two. No, sorry, the green is the top part. My mistake. The green is the top part. That's right. Anyway, and here it is. And these are wraparound ones. They've got UV, so you can actually wear them outside as well. I think the UV stuff is, why would you need it? Because you really, if you're going to be wearing blue blocking glasses, you only should be wearing them at night anyway.
Yeah. I find I still have sunglasses in my car for when I need them. Like I'm unavoidably getting a really bad sun glare from looking directly at the at the edge of, at the road or whatever when I need to be able to look there, right, from a car or from a building. Unless if I can possibly shade my eyes or just not look at the sun, obviously, then I don't wear sunglasses. And I used to wear sunglasses constantly, and I find that my eyes feel a lot better without them. So
yeah, so it's that Euro stream there on the 4th of April. So it's in one of the comments there that I actually replied to one of the people. So you can go and check it out. Go to that link, and then just look at the pairs and look at your price point, because people have got multiple family members and they may want as well, and and some people can't afford the very pricey ones. So anything is better than nothing in my book in that regard. Obviously, the more pricier ones are going to cover those wavelengths far better, and it'll be, and some people have got far more issues in terms of, like poor sleep and things like that. So for those people, may be more important. And especially for, a lot of older people as well, that are actually, tend to, like you've got a grandmum that's actually sitting in front of the TV all day in the evenings, and ending up with poor sleep. And that's not good for Alzheimer's and stuff like that, and dementia. So in that regard, so you have to, different people are going to have different requirements, but, if people are having a lot of screen time, they definitely, should go for the pricier point, in a sense. If they're not, they could probably get away with, with a cheaper sort of pair like I've got for a couple of hours here or there. So yeah, so pretty much that is it. I'll just unshare that, because get rid of it. Yeah, exactly. They've got a different. They've still got some blue spectrum, but they've got a better spectrum than the LEDs. The problem is they use more energy. So if and especially nowadays with with this madness with sort of that we've got with the climate stuff, and our energy electricity's bills are just going through the roof. So it's that's another issue in itself. And so there are solutions. There are cheaper options. I don't have the links here. I've got them at home. I've been saying, sorry, I've got them on my work computer over there, because I'm actually working from home now, as you guys know. But I'll have to remember to grab those links off there, and I will do something in a future date, which I'll go through some of the companies that are selling quite cheap LED lights that basically can be used in the home, and basically eliminate the blue light for the evenings, because most people just turn on lights in the evenings anyway, so it's far better to eliminate that sort of part of the spectrum. And I think they're not very expensive. They last for ages. I think one of the cheaper ones that I found was about $20 odd, but they last for multiple, the equivalent of many of the other LEDs far longer. So if you buy one now and then, let's say you buy one every month, $20 is manageable. By the end of the year, you'll probably have replaced most of your stuff in your home. You don't have to buy everything in one hit, I say to people, so I am looking to try and find cheaper ones as well. So, in that regard, it's unfortunately most of the people that set up these sites that are into this sort of stuff, usually go and get the best of the best, the highest quality and all that, and it costs an arm and a leg, and only the upper middle class can afford them. Not even I can afford them, to literally outlay hundreds of dollars for some of the stuff that people sell, or thousands in some regards. It's just not practical. So still looking for options in that regard. I haven't had a chance, because now with a friggin' social isolating, I haven't had a chance to speak to my mate that's come back from Poland and have a sit down and see whether some of this stuff can actually be produced by some company in China, northern China, where it's cheaper, and whether there's an option, or in other parts of Asia, because we need to find cheaper solutions, because the current solutions are just too expensive for the majority of people. She couldn't help herself.
Cheaper LEDs also have like a strobe to them that some people can see, some people don't tend. I think everyone can see it if you can just kind of attenuate to what you're looking for, but a lot of people don't notice it, and that really impacts my eye strain. I have some LEDs in my house that are fine as long as they're a good quality LED and like a warm white, but some of them are like, they're kind of a bluish white, and they also have a, like I said, a strobe or flicker, especially noticeable in like your peripheral vision. So that's I don't know, it's another issue that kind of makes it more expensive for people to get the right light.
Richard's got a comment. Get hair clippers. Yes, that could be a solution. They don't open those, the barber shops and the hairdressing salons. It may have to, otherwise I'll look like Frank, fizzed out. That's one for you, mate. You can answer this one.
No,
or comment.
No black market raw, no feelings. No. It's perfectly legal for me to have. Lucky for me.
That could work as well. We use a burnt out match and tweezers to get them off. Oh. I thought you were talking about something else. Back to the ticks. Ooh. Please do not use blow torches for these things.
I think I probably only got another 10 minutes or so in me, Harry.
That's okay, mate. Is he still around?
I don't know. He popped in and said hello. And
he popped in. That's it.
Popped out. Must be busy.
Yeah, look, he's got vids to produce and stuff like that.
One or two other things to do, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. Haven't read much on iodine. Do you know what the upper limits, if any? I can't remember off the top of my head. Do you remember the top limit for the iodine?
I don't. I have heard Paul Saladino take issue with getting milligram quantities of iodine. He said that it's sort of something he doesn't really recommend supplementing because it's difficult to get a small amount.
Yeah, I think the risk there is to push yourself into a sort of a hyperthyroid sort of situation, and I don't think it's a smart thing to do.
Iodine supplementation is one of the most polarizing things I've encountered on talking about a meat-based or carnivore diet. Actually, it's something that people who have success with it are so glad that they were able to resolve the issues that they did using iodine. And
it's probably because they were so deficient.
Right, and then there's also people that developed issues from supplementing it unnecessarily or supplementing too much who say they regret it. So,
I think people need to check their levels. Yeah, I think
I've also heard of applying it transdermally to sort of minimize the risk for toxicity.
That's true. I've got a spray, but it's more for like the sort of the to use basically as a preventative thing for respiratory type things, where I just gargle it and stuff like that. But that's all I've got in that regard in terms of supplements. But primarily I focus on seafood, eggs, those sort of things that are high in it. And I actually did a calculation last time, and I get more than enough I get above the RDI basically from the foods that I eat. And I think as long as you're getting just slightly above the RDIs, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to have a big effect with iodine, which is part of the problem with supplementing it.
Precisely.
And, I would say if you're suspicious that you might be deficient, then try to get it from Whole Foods. Maybe get like an iodized sea salt, which you can find. It just might not be at every store.
Yeah.
A lot of people
right.
don't get seafood recommend iodized sea salt for that reason.
Yep, I do the same thing, and I actually have an iodinized sea salt, and if basically, especially now in this period, because I'm not getting enough seafood, and occasionally I'll use a bit of that rather than my regular sea salt. So, which is, it's actually from lake beds in Australia, which is basically much more ancestral, doesn't have any issues with, like microplastics and stuff like that. That's the only reason I use it. But I'm using the other one, the Sax iodinized sea salt, just for that reason, because I'm not getting enough, even though I did pig out yesterday at Dad's place on cod. But, that's why I still haven't had a meal. That's how much I pigged out. I really pigged out. Okay, science unbiased. Over 200,000 new cases of leprosy in 2018. Shit. Most in India. That doesn't surprise me. 50,000 cases of bubonic plague over the last 20 years. I'm aware of the bubonic plague issues in Asia. That's been around on and off going, and in some other parts of the world as well. But yeah, antibiotics pretty much deal with that. It's not a big issue, but I didn't realise that there was a rise in India again. I know that India's had a lot of issues, because especially in the south where they have vegetarian diets and stuff like that, and a lot of them are basically nowadays, because of the high amount of seed oils and sugar that they're consuming, they have higher rates of diabetes and a lot of these sort of diseases. So I'm not surprised that communicable diseases are having a bit of a comeback in that part of the world, where people's immune systems are weaker. The gift keeps on giving. Yeah, average 200 leprosies and 7 plague cases in the US yearly. Okay, didn't realise that. I know in the northern part of Australia, there's been 1 or 2 in the indigenous communities, 1 or 2 cases, not of plague, but of leprosy. I think it was leprosy. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. There was one of these diseases that are old diseases that sort of appeared. It could have been TB. I can't remember now what it was. That was a while ago that I remember hearing it on the TV or somewhere. It's frightening that some of these coming back. Maybe with all this misuse of antibiotics and stuff like that, there are some that are actually coming back because they're getting resistant to them. That's scary stuff if that's happening. Yeah, that is definitely scary stuff. Let's try and get some. It's okay, Richard. Just read your comment. And Luke's he's got a new one. I didn't even notice it. Well, look at this one. Oops. Come on. I need to zoom in. Zoom too far out. Okay. Bring this up on the screen. Come on, respond. I have to be very nice to, oops. What an average young adult does on Saturday night. What a high IQ young adult does on Saturday night. Thanks, mate.
Of course, he chose his own comment on screen, I see.
Exactly. The word is he, you know, young. I'll take that anytime. Grandpa, I'll take that anytime. Those young people are having far too much fun. I'm jealous.
Is somebody on fire there, or what's going on with that background? I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. I'll bring it back up. Yeah, it's like in that.
Oh, it's just
It's the light
meant
effects.
to be like a motion streak from
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. Well, there's not a lot of distortion on her face, so maybe it's some lighting effect or whatever, or something creative that Luke's come up with. Don't know. He never ceases to amaze me with these things. I'm jealous.
At least one a stream. At least one per stream, Luke. You heard me.
That's it. That's it. Chemical engineering here, but I can't. That's some comment. Times to reap money from ancestral health community with light. Yes, yes.
I'm very interested in infrared sauna, which is sort of light therapy. I'm
Yeah,
interested in far infrared light therapy as well with light arrays.
Well, infrared saunas seem to be, a lot of people find benefit from them.
Yeah, I guess they sort of stimulate more heat shock protein creation because they heat you to your core temperature higher faster. And because they're not heating the air temperature around you, you're able to tolerate having your core temperature elevated for longer as well.
Yeah.
So.
Something those fucking EMF things don't do. They don't increase your heat shock proteins. Damn. They would be therapeutic if they did.
Therapeutic cell reception. Perfect.
That's just a bit of a slap, you know. I had to throw that in. But, yeah, I mean, look, I think, look, you know, there you go, mate. You know, you could jump into the fray and develop, a circadian light source for the average, person in the street. You know, light up your home and keep yourself in circadian match. You know, you can have like a circadian match and sort of have like a match. Well, you know, I'm just being, advertising crazy or basically, talking shit. Don't give up your day job, basically, is what everybody's saying. You know, they go, don't give up your day job, Harry. Nah, yeah. You're not really good with the advertising slogans. Hey, Luke, you got some competition. You better move quick to get to market. Okay. So
It's good to
Richard
hear.
basically went to low carb, even keto, and almost eliminated his migraines. I know that a lot of people find relief that do, especially the high fat type of low carb keto type. They notice much more. I don't know whether basically adding MCTs to the mix would actually help more, or or not, or make no difference. That's one thing that people, like, if you got relatives that are basically, let's say, have migraine issues, they're not willing to do keto or carnivore, maybe an MCT supplement for them may work, or at least reduce the severity to some extent.
Yeah, I know someone who suffered from just about chronic migraines. That it's almost certainly because of the amount of refined carbohydrate in her diet, and was one of the first cases of learning that I had to just watch some people I care about suffer because they're not willing to talk about these things.
Mm. Yeah, if anybody knows of people that are basically on a carbohydrate diet and have used MCTs to reduce their migraines, I think we'd be really interested in the chat. We could put it up. I think that's just me thinking out loud, but it may be a possibility that, because it's basically based on, like, Antonio D'Agostino, the researcher, the low carb researcher out of Miami that does a lot of things for the US Navy SEALs.
Yep.
So he creates all those ketone esters. And, for a number of these neurological issues or issues like epilepsy and stuff like that, these things do work. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they worked for migraines as well, for people that are on regular diets, the mixed diets, or, that weren't eating a sort of a carnivore keto type diet. But, hard to say, really.
Yeah, I was never able to pinpoint any specific trigger for mine either, other than seasonality and fatigue. Yeah.
Yeah, look, sometimes these sort of things come and go. I mean, I, as a young child, had bronchitis touch asthma. And when I went to Greece and started eating a lot of animal products, may have just been coincidence. May have been the extra vitamin D or the sunlight or whatever. But it all went away. I think it actually has to do more with the diet, because I was able to use the same sort of approach with choline and certain saturated fats and stuff like that into my sister's diet and reverse her asthma. So I think it has more to do with that. But, because she was living on an island, sunbaking all the time. So I don't think it was the sun. And she had 25 years being on a vegetarian diet. So I would say the animal foods seem to be magical for a lot of things. It's what our bodies need to basically heal and work properly. It really comes down to that. It's not nothing complicated or woo-woo.
Yeah, I get really, really bold zebra striping, and I'm doing this because it's in like sort of the upper right sphere of my vision.
Yeah, so Nesro is also usually gets sort of seizures, and sort of carnivores sort of helped. A lot of people that have basically moved, I mean, sometimes keto and certain types of keto seem to work as well, but general low carb, helps but doesn't really mitigate. And or paleo, and when people move to either keto or carnivore or combine both, it seems to do the magic trick for most people. So Cheryl used to get migraines when she smoked. All stopped when I gave up and changed diet. So it may have not been the giving up the smoking. It may have been basically the diet. I would say I'd put more money on the diet than anything else. Okay, Luke, is it possible to avoid or delay presbyopia, any diet or lifestyle hacks? I think that, yes, there is. And I noticed for myself that my eyesight's actually improved. I can actually read since I've been, more carnivorous, and especially with, upping my taurine sort of intake as well. I noticed that I can actually read smaller text than some other people at my work that are actually either the same age as me or younger can't. So I do think you can. I don't think you can prevent it entirely, but I think you can delay it.
Yeah, I think it can be improved as well. There's an interesting presentation on the Ancestry Foundation YouTube channel talking about specific sort of eye exercises you can do as well to sort of strengthen that motion in your eye to flex your cornea.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, basically it's just progressively moving just to the edge of the distance that makes it uncomfortable to read, and doing this for in a very controlled, incremental way.
It's probably a bit like what I do. I take breaks when I'm working, like every 45 minutes, and I usually go and look at distant things.
Yep.
So, and I do this at work, and I do this even now that I'm working from home, so, and that's sort of deliberate, to not one, because I used to use this program that I can't get to work from home currently until they set us up with a proper VPN. But I can't get back to the server to basically run this program, which was set up from the University of Tasmania on my computer. And it's basically called Exertime. And what it does is it locks up your system every 45 minutes and gets you to do some sort of exercise or walk away from your computer, get off your butt, basically, which is a real good thing. But I can't enable it at the moment because it's not working, because it can't connect back via the server back to the University of Tasmania. So currently I've basically just put in my calendar like time things that pop up, reminders. Get your ass off the seat, you have to be crude to yourself, and basically, I'll go out and look at a distance as well from, do a bit of a walk right around where I am, just a quick walk for, just a couple of minutes, and then come back, sit down, and I think that's a better way of doing it. But I think diet plays a big role. Eye health. If you look at all the ancestral information, all that, like tribal people that could look at long distances, it just seems that when you're on an inappropriate diet, your eye health deteriorates as much as everything else in your body. So I think the diet does have a connection to it. How much basically looking at a distance and not always looking close to a screen, how much these two things, it's hard to say. But I would definitely say that, you're not going to, I'd say it's probably a good thing to do. If I get visuals, like I take paracetamol, ibuprofen, ACST. Okay.
Codeine, even for a migraine.
Codeine, I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's a little heavy.
Yeah. For that sort of stuff. I don't like taking any of this sort of medication because, because there's a lot of issues related to them.
Yeah, when I used to experience like severe headaches, the last time I experienced severe headaches, I'm not assuming that I couldn't get severe again, but I used to have to take like Advil, Lipogels, and sleep. The pain wouldn't really subside until I could fall asleep for a nap for maybe a half hour or so. Um, but since they've been decreased in severity, I haven't needed to take any painkillers for them. And I used to get really severe pain from it. Like it would be, like I said, I'd be nauseated, basically incapacitated, super light sensitive. Car ride home from school, I remember it would be excruciating if there were any bumps in the road.
Probably paracetamol is a bit safer than ibuprofen. Ibuprofen seems to be has far more side effects, which,
Yeah, I suppose what I was taking would have been ibuprofen.
The occasional now and then may not be an issue, but then again, if you're in the weeds suffering like that, I remember when I was basically in the hospital with my kidney stones and screaming out for morphine. So I know what you mean. When you're in the, all the sort of side effects, who gives a shit? Just give me the stuff. I can sympathise with that. I've been there for other reasons. Eating too many oxalate foods, spinach. Yes.
Well, I just hope taking painkillers like that you don't get migraines too often.
Yeah, I think an appropriate diet, does reduce these things. Whether adding ketone esters potentially as a strategy for these, I know that for other issues, people use them and actually get certain results. It's really for people to basically trial and error, test some of these things, try some of these things out. If they work, good. If they don't, it's pretty much the way to go about it.
Yeah, I certainly, and I certainly don't judge anybody that needs to take painkillers for something as acute as a migraine. They can be completely debilitating for sure, but it's something that if diet can help ameliorate those symptoms and reduce painkiller use, then that's a good thing.
No, just basically UVA and UVB. That's all. All the other wavelengths still get through.
Yep, unless it's like a yellow or orange tinted.
Yeah. If it's a sunglass with that, it's got a bit of a yellow, orange, or red tint. Yep. That could block quite a bit of that spectrum. That's true. There are those, what are they called? Even some of the safety glasses have got some of those colours in them. I don't know whether they how well they block those things, because they're not specifically designed for that. Yeah. And Nesray also said zero car fixed for me completely, which is basically, I suspect, something to do with one of these neurological or seizure issues or whatever, something like that. I wasn't paying attention, but I also worked out a breathing technique for it, and that is effective. Okay, I know basically these. I know certain yoga breathing techniques that can basically deep breathing and stuff like that, where your diaphragm sort of comes up and all that, and they can help basically like lower the stress and sort of provide relief in that regard. Is that what you're talking about? Something along those lines, or something different that I haven't heard of?
He was saying his migraines are more like seizures for him. But that's interesting to me that a breathing technique could work, whereas migraines are it's very much a vascular headache, right? That's so it would seem plausible to me that you could potentially influence your blood pressure.
Yeah, I think basically most of these issues are related to diet. So if you're taking this stuff out, look, I think there's we're not saying that that meat is going to basically be panacea or the cure for everything, but if you take a look at people that basically have gone 100% carnivore, there's quite a few people in the community that basically have completely reversed their ailments, in terms of neurological issues of a lot of types. and we haven't seen that on any other diet anywhere. So, I haven't seen any vegans basically claiming that they can actually reduce that. They use drugs. I haven't seen people on a SAD diet that claim that they use drugs. I haven't seen anybody on a Mediterranean diet say that they use drugs. Even the paleo people, I haven't really seen. There's a couple, the ones that are doing a more high-fat paleo-style diet, which is more like a low-carb ketogenic paleo. But the general paleo community that consumes still quite a few carbs, no. So I think a restriction of carbohydrates plays a big role in a lot of these neurological diseases. Everybody I've spoken to and seen, and it's not so much the meat, it's the absence of the carbs, the sugar.
Yeah.
Removing the sugar. It's, whether you have fish, whether you have, other things which don't, and you exclude the sugar is really the big thing. So yes, I would agree that, that meat only, no, because you can basically have meat and put a whole lot of sugar on it and glycate it to the hell, and consume that, and it's not going to be very good. It's going to be very deleterious to you.
Yeah, I'm not. I probably am a little bit biased against carbs for just my personal health, at least. But I'm not. It's not dogmatic, but it's just that I think it's important not to underestimate your body's ability to heal any issue. And if you're experiencing an issue that's health related, then it makes sense to try to maximize your body's ability to repair what it does, right? And the most effective way to do that seems to be through diet. It seems to be specifically with the goal of lowering chronic systemic inflammation to reduce that wasting of resources. So they're going toward unnecessary things. And carbohydrates just are not going to be very conducive for achieving that goal. So if I think it's important to not to be dogmatic about vilifying them, and I think it's also important not to pretend that it's not an extremely effective lever to completely remove them for a time.
And that's the experience of a lot of people, So, we're not here sort of carb bashing in that regard, but at the same time, people that have got these sort of conditions seem to do better with removing the sugar. Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, I had some honey garlic sausages tonight. I had a little bit of carbohydrate in them, and I think they might have had some sage as well. So I'll be handing in my carnivore badge and gun in the morning.
Oops, I just lost my spot. Yes, this is so annoying when that happens. StreamYard. Yeah.
I think I may take this slight lull in the conversation to go to bed.
Yep, you do that, mate. I'm not too far away because it's just slightly over 3 hours. But at the same time, not a problem.
Oh, that's interesting. I find breath work interesting. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, as usual.
Yep, you're welcome. It's good to see you.
Likewise. And I hope that you're able to keep your head on straight through all of this lunacy in the world today for the next week. JoJo's reference?
Yeah, Luke's got a different style. The JoJo one.
I don't follow.
What can I say about these?
People are telling me I look tired. Yeah. It's 12:30 here. And I was already had a longer day than I expected to.
Did you see the JoJo thing?
No. Or I don't remember if I did. I don't think I did.
Oh, bring it up. So this is the where is it? Oh, jump somewhere else. What's she doing?
What
So
are
she
you
runs
exposing me
around
to
like
right
mad.
before I go dream?
It's a JoJo Siwa ice cream. Better get rid of that. Gone. Yes. Some of you boys need to get a get a life. They were arguing before about JoJo ice cream or whatever. I said I can do the ice cream part.
Yeah, we actually made a little bit of ice cream this week.
Sounds good.
First time in a while. Look at the milk that we got has so much extra cream on it. It's delicious. All right.
Anyway, mate,
Well,
you better go.
yeah, I'll see you next
Good
week.
night. Yep, definitely. Take care, and we'll
Thanks.
chat next week.
Okay.
Bye,
See you
mate.
then. Take care.
See ya. Well, back to me. Yep. Extremely effective. It also reversed my hair loss. Yep. Look, extra protein. I mean, you notice me. I it grows like mad. You know, I think where people on keto diets lose hair or stuff like that, it's in particular when they go really low protein. I mean, even people when they come out of like a fast, they basically start doing these fat bombs and all that. And I'm going, huh? Your body needs to rebuild your immune system, once you've actually fasted for 3 days. So what does it need? It needs protein. It's just logical. It needs protein because every single little nano machine in your body, all the enzymes, which is what these nano machines are, all these sort of things, are basically made up of protein. So you need more protein. Yes, you need energy, but you definitely need protein. You can't restrict protein. You finished your fast. Now you need to rebuild. You need to rebuild tissue. You need to rebuild your immune system and things like that. So, very important. That's why I think, carnivore diet has that improvement in hair and stuff like that. Obviously, some people are struggling with hair. I usually say, well, it could be a prolactin issue. It could be basically too much xenoestrogens in your environment. There are two ways of actually like methylating away as like xenoestrogens and stuff like that. And that's basically with a boron supplement, and also choline. So you have extra choline that you would have normally. So that's your really two best ways to deal with that, and get rid of the sort of and keep up the protein to get rid of the sort of alopecia issues or whatever. I think he will. He's had his milk. He's had his milk. That'll put him to sleep. Yeah, it looked a bit, mate. If you had to basically traverse the borders between Canada and snipers and sort of duck and all this sort of stuff, you'd be bloody exhausted as well. Yep, we got that. So yeah, pretty much. Some of these boys, these younger boys, I mean, that are actually on, that follow me. Yeah. I hope, as I said, while they're watching this, I hope they're entertaining themselves properly with a bit of ice cream. Oops. You love it, don't you? Yep. We all lost something while we were watching that. Yes. So what's this? The action anime with over-the-top comedy and action. Yep. Minus the ice cream. That'll come later. I do when I'm talking about high protein, I'm talking about like 35% of my calories, which really it's a sort of an oxymoron because when we talk about calories, this is how are they really calories? Do you oxidize protein? Very little in extreme cases when you're basically, you've exhausted everything. You're emaciated nearly. Well, you've starved yourself, and then basically the body's got nothing else other than starting to break down its own protein. But generally speaking, we don't oxidize protein. We use it as a structural material for both our cells, enzymes, and everything else in the body. So, and even fat, we use both fat as a structural material and as an energy source. Sugar is primarily like 99% or whatever, but it also has glycosylation of proteins, and even the sort of the sugar molecules on a pericellular matrix. So it's still used in different parts in that regard. So it has very minor. So that's why calories. When you think about it, I mean, it's sort of nonsense in a sense. It's like even saturated fat. Saturated fat basically has much lower calorie density. So, because of the reversal, I can't remember the palmitate and stearic acid, how much they've got, but I know the combination of fats in cocoa butter is 5.5 calories for every gram. 9 is only for seed oils, 9.1. And the calories in omega 3s, which come from fish oil, which you can't burn really, because it's sort of that also is utilized by the body. It's not basically something, it's not used as energy. So it's structural. And so that basically is 9.3. So all these sort of calorie shit, it just doesn't make sense. It's sort of just it's sort of a measure to sort of work out, what we're actually getting in and stuff like that. But really, it's sort of a bit of a dangerous measure. I sort of don't count at all. I stick to basically try to get 1-to-1. That's what I try to do. Anyway, guys, we've had fun. It's, past 3 hours. Please like and subscribe. We'll leave it here and see you next week.